When I hear a story, oh, I'm working at this company for X number of years and I hate it, but I have to pay the bills. It's understandable that sometimes you need to do something to get out of a financial situation. But I believe that there is a job for you, regardless of your financial needs. You can work, you can use your talents and be paid and be happy. Because if you're happy, your family's happy, your relationships are happier. So that's why Ikigai is such an important part of my company name.
Minasan, ohayou gozaimasu, konnichiwa, konbanwa. Bienvenida, bienvenido a contactojapon.com. Si te dedicas a una carrera creativa, fotografía, música, diseño, arquitectura, artes visuales, cocina, y buscas ideas, material o experiencias que te cambien la vida, te podemos ayudar. Soy Byron Barón, educador y promotor cultural, y quiero compartir lo mejor que guardo de más de 30 años en contacto con Japón, 15 enseñando su idioma y 9 diseñando experiencias en la Tierra del Sol naciente. Japón es mucho más que sushi, samurái y geisha. También es arte, disrupción y mucha, mucha creatividad. Japón para gente creativa.
Minasan, ohayou gozaimasu, konnichiwa, konbanwa. This is our first interview in English, and this time I have a big pleasure to introduce a friend of mine. I met Kasia Lynch 20 years ago when I started my Japanese experience in Japan, and this time we will have a conversation. We will have a talk on Ikigai, on her project, which is a very interesting program to give support to all those professionals wishing to study or work either in Japan or with Japanese companies. Kasia, I'm so happy to have you here after all this time. And we are so excited also to hear your experience and all the information you have to share with us. So please, Kasia, introduce yourself, let us know who you are, and tell us about your first contact with Japanese culture.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Byron. This is really, it's hilarious how our lives have been intertwined 20 years ago. Can you imagine?
We look better now.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Absolutely. It's very interesting to me, and I'm so glad that we're in touch. And I'm excited to see that you are also using your Japanese knowledge in your business with Contacto Japón, and I as well with my own business for Ikigai Connections. But to answer your question, I'll start from the beginning. I've been studying Japanese since 1993, and my high school had an exchange program to go to Shigaken in Japan. And my year, nobody wanted to go. So they kind of the teacher talked to my father and they convinced me to go. And usually they send 2 students, but my year, it was just me. So I accepted. I said, okay, fine. I'll go for the first 4 months of my senior year in high school. It wasn't something that I really wanted to do. It was just something that I thought I had to do as a good student, as a good daughter. And I went to Shigaken, and my entire life changed. At age 17, I became a different person. Life-changing experience. I had to go to a high school. I was living in Inaka in the middle of nowhere, and compared to where I lived in Michigan, you don't have a car to get to school. There's no, you had to wear a uniform. I definitely stood out with my blonde hair, and it was just a very different experience for me. And those 4 months in Japan, it was just, I didn't realize that there was so much more outside of my bubble, my world. And I was exposed to a different country, different ways of eating, different cultures. My mind was blown. And then I came back home to Michigan after those 4 months. and my life was never the same. I changed everything. I decided I definitely want to study Japanese. I'll go to college for this. And it just made me realize I started becoming a more globally minded person. I realized that there's many religions, many people, many languages, many right ways of doing things. That is something that very few people can grasp their mind around, because we tend to think that our way is the best and only way. But then when you get exposed to a different culture, there's a different way that looks at it from a completely different perspective. And that's what I love the most. So that was probably my first foray into Japan at a young age of 17. When I first selected Japanese as a class in my high school, I only selected Japanese because it was one of 4 languages that they offered. It was French, Spanish, German, and Japanese. And I had to pick one. And out of all of those, I thought, I'll be different. I'll take Japanese. Okay. But when I actually went to Japan, to be honest, I mean, I really enjoyed the culture. I enjoyed having fun, visiting all the temples, the shrines, visiting all these like sites that I've never seen before. But I really think it's the language aspect. I really appreciated hearing a new language, wanting to know what they were saying. It was a puzzle to me. And kanji, most of all, I love kanji. For some reason, I have a pictographic memory that if I see a kanji, I will have a better idea of what it is. Don't ask me to write it. Don't ask me to say it out loud, but I'll have a general idea of what it is. So everywhere I looked, the signs, the food, the menus, I always wanted to know what was written there. So that was like a puzzle to me. And I think that combined with the warm-hearted people I experienced, I had such a wonderful, warm welcome to Japan. And throughout my entire language studies, from age 17 to even now, every time I said a new word, I learned a new word, or I learned a new phrase, I was supported the entire way. I would say arigato, and they would pachi, 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 pachi. And then arigato gozaimashita, pachi, 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 pachi. So like I built upon my language, and along the way, they cheered me on. My host families, my schools, the fellow students, my friends. It was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, that's something that we really appreciate, and it's something that encourages us to continue with the language.
Yes.
The fact that they really appreciate that you at least make the effort to speak it.
Exactly.
So that's something really motivating on learning Japanese. It doesn't happen with another language, because if you're studying or learning German or French or Italian, those people, I mean, no one in Italy, Germany, or France will clap, will cheer you up for saying some words in their language. But in Japanese, that's something really. Sometimes it's like okay, I just said arigato. I mean, you don't have to clap for that, but in the end, it's like okay, I appreciate you're that happy for me to speak your language.
Exactly. I found that to be the case in other countries as well. Maybe I would try to put in an effort, but nowhere like Japan, where they just cheer you on, and they seem so appreciative of me wanting to learn their language, and then they would try to reciprocate. So we'd have mutually beneficial relationship and mutual understanding. So I really found that to be the case anywhere I went in Japan, and I lived in different parts of Japan.
Great. And I see you were also a victim of the charm of kanji.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. It was my case also. I was absolutely captivated by the contact of the ink on the paper. Nice. On the shoulder classes, so only that, and seeing the rhythm and the beauty of the strokes and the whole the whole stage for doing shodo calligraphy is just beautiful.
I agree.
Good, Kasia. And how about there was a first experience, only 4 months in countryside, but then you went back for you were already in love with Japan, and you decided to go back for studying,
Yes.
right? Okay, tell us about your academic experience there. How did you get to study in a Japanese university? No, first you went
Absolutely.
to high school, right?
Yep. So that 4 months was in high
Exactly,
school.
exactly.
And then when I went to Boston University here in the United States, and they had a program. It's called KCJS. Now it's Kyoto Consortium for Japanese Studies. And it was many American universities that got together, and they sent their students to a place in Kyoto. And I was in the 10th year. Now they're going on late 30s, I believe, almost 40. But I was one of the first few years, and we were in a small school. It was a very small building near the Kyoto Zoo, just south of Heian Jingu. And it was a beautiful location. We had very intensive Japanese studies, and that was all. It was my third year of Boston University, so the credits aligned, and it worked out perfectly. So while I was there in that 1 year program, I decided I have to come back. So when I graduated from my Boston University, I looked into various opportunities and how I can go back to Japan. So I reached out to my consulate here in Michigan, and they recommended two programs, and I'm sure you're aware, which the MEXT Monbu Kagakusho Shogakkin, that's the MEXT scholarship now, and then also the JET program. So I considered both options, and I really wanted to go back to school. I thought maybe I would have a better opportunity to use my Japanese as opposed to being a teacher on JET. At the time, I did not know that JET had a CIR program, which is the Coordinator for International Relations. So if anybody's listening to this and they're interested in JET, they offer, I'm sure from every country, they offer, including Spain, if I'm not mistaken, to go to become a JET teacher, as well as potentially become a coordinator for international relations, where you work in like a governmental office, you use Japanese all day. I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity from what I hear from my friends and people who have attended, but I did the MEXT. So at the time, we could go and have 6 months of language study, which is where Byron and I met. And then we each had a year where we were sent to our different schools. So I was sent to a women's university in Tokyo for 1 year to do research. And because I loved it so much, I applied for an extension. And the only way I was able to receive that extension was if I got accepted to that graduate school program. So I figured after 1 year of research, I'm going to try. So I took the Nyugak Shiken with all the other Japanese students. And they let me use my dictionaries, but I had to take the exam, just like the same one. There was no special one. So here I am. I have 3 dictionaries, my English to Japanese, my Japanese to English, and my kanji. And I tried my hardest. They accepted me, and I stayed for 2 more years. And that's how I received my master's degree, by doing research in sociology. So it was so difficult. I learned so much Japanese. In fact, I didn't have time to think in English. There was the classes, there was the conversations, there was the homework. And at first I was listening in Japanese, thinking in English, writing notes in English, thinking in English, talking in Japanese. It was too much. I had to remove the English, and I just listened in Japanese, wrote in Japanese, spoke in Japanese. And that's how my Japanese improved, because I had to keep up. I had to be on top of the homework, and it was the best thing I've ever could have done for my Japanese language.
Exactly. Under that pressure, you don't even think. You don't have to act only. You don't even have time to think. So, Kasia, let us know what was your level, your Japanese level, by the time you applied for the MEXT scholarship? By that time. I would
say before applying, or as I applied for the MEXT scholarship, I know now you have to be like an N2 potentially, but at the time, I don't think there was that requirement, because I had never taken the Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken, the JLPT. I took that afterwards. But I would say that my Japanese was at a typical level when you finish university. So if you have 3 or 4 years of Japanese in university, you come out fairly intermediate, not advanced, but just, you can, depending on your school.
Yeah,
So
somewhere between N4 and N3.
Yeah, let's say between, more on the N4 side, I believe. I think I was more N4. And then after I finished the MEXT, I took the Nihongo no Shiken and I was N1. So I did so much studying.
My God, N1 is amazing.
It's a test. So as long as you learn how to take an exam, because again, with the Nihongo no Shiken, you're not testing your speaking. It's listening, It's reading and writing. So if you can handle especially the reading and writing, you can, I think, do very well on that.
Yeah, the key for taking the both N2 and N1 would be the reading, and just knowing the kanjis, and because sometimes most of the people who are quite fluent in Japanese, I mean, they could have the understanding, the listening skill very, very high, but they don't read Japanese. So they could have the listening part already approved, but without reading it, I mean, yeah, they wouldn't be able to pass the exam. And how Japanese language and culture have enhanced your professional career? Let us know. Okay, you finished your research, your master degree, and after that, I understand you were working. You went to work in Poland, also in back at home in the United States, and also in Italy. Okay, so you had this corporate business experience using your Japanese, and how this contact with Japanese people in Japan and outside Japan enhanced your professional career.
Well, like many people who probably are your followers for Contacto Japón, once you like Japan, once you're there for a few years, it just really grows on you and you become this amazing Japan fan. And I wanted to stay in Japan for many more years. And I wanted to use my Japanese language skills in a career. So I didn't just want to live in Japan. I wanted to use Japanese at work. So because I had a particular interest in music, I looked into and I did shushoku katsudo, where you do the job search when you graduate. So with the other graduates, it's a very strict hiring process or application process. So I applied to many companies, and I also applied to some companies that may not have been so strict in their job search or their employee search, but they just were open to hiring people. So I did a lot of interviews, and eventually I did find a job in the music industry where I helped promote concerts in Tokyo. So I was there, and I really enjoyed using my Japanese. It was a way, I was their bridge. I helped bridge cultures between the local Japanese staff and the people we spoke to, whether I mostly dealt with people in the United States, London, and sometimes Australia, so English-speaking countries. And I really found pleasure in becoming that bridge, because even though both sides can understand the language, so let's say the meeting would be in English, there's always some kind of nuance that can cause one side to look maybe slightly negatively or differently on the other side. So I would notice those nuances, and I would step in and say, hey, by the way, this person may have said this or may have done that, may have said yes, 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 but that doesn't necessarily mean we're agreeing to your request. So we have to think about it. We'll have to come back to you. So I kind of filled in the gaps by knowing both cultures and being able to strengthen their relationships. And I really enjoyed that. So in my other jobs, I did go then to Poland, and I was working in the electronics industry. I did the same thing. And this time I could use my Polish skills as well, even though my parents are from Poland, but my Polish is not as good because I didn't go to school with it. But I was able to use my Polish, English, and Japanese to, again, become a bridge between people. So if there was an issue with anything, HR or, production or quality control, they'd call me and I'd come in, and it wouldn't necessarily be the words that they were using. It was just the concepts behind the words. So I really loved using my skills and knowledge to bring people together. I definitely have always wanted to connect people, make them all happy together, have their relationships be strong. So I did the same in Italy. I was a freelance interpreter translator, but I wasn't because I was freelance, I didn't really have long-term relationships. I just had one-time relationship building appointments, shall we say. And then when I moved back home to Michigan, I worked at a manufacturing company for 5.5 years, and I did the same. But this time I eventually had a team of employees who were like me, where they're studying Japanese. They love it. They wanted to use their skills. So they were working for me. I trained them. I helped them. We were helping not just other departments within our American company. And this was the headquarters was in Hiroshima, but we also became bridges for the other sister companies around the world. So I really found joy in seeing relationships improve regardless of the border and the language. And I'm very thankful to Japanese and my time in Japan for helping me do that, because I think the world would be a nicer place if we all just wanted to appreciate our differences and not worry so much about the, to be open to differences. That's what I want.
Yeah, the good things or the very interesting thing interpreting from Japanese is that it's not only the language, but it's all these hidden aspects of culture. Because if you have an idea, if you have a glimpse of the language, you think, as you said before, you think that if they're saying yes, is that because they're approving, and it doesn't necessarily think that means that, or if they say sore wa chotto muzukashi, they are saying no in a very indirect and subtle way.
Yes.
So this is very useful if you are working with Japanese people or in a Japanese company, but it also gives you extra tools if you for your life or for the way you can develop, you can prepare, you can plan your daily activities also.
Absolutely. It is a gift. It's a tool that you can enhance your personal and your professional life with. Knowing another language is is just that. It's a tool and enhancement.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something that I really appreciated as well. And it's a form of nemawashi, which maybe your listeners understand, but nemawashi is kind of gaining approval before making a decision. So as you're gaining approval, you're getting feedback and you're improving upon something, so that the final result, when you show it for approval, is, everybody's thoughts are included and it's a good product. So I think that helps with paying attention to detail, because people are always thinking, how will somebody else look at this decision, or how will this department be affected, and how will that person or our customer, what will our customers think? And I have an example that I've used before in a different podcast, but if I may share this here, I had this meeting it was late in the evening in Tokyo, and it was my chairman, it was the president, it was the head accountant, and it was one more person. I'm drawing a blank on who they were, and me, because I was helping draft the correspondence to the United States. We were faxing documents back and forth, and we had to confirm a legal document. So it was a very important deal. And normally what would happen is we would read it during our business hours. We'd make some changes. We'd send it to New York. They would review it. So we'd wake up the next morning, we'd come back, and we'd do this all over back and forth. So it would take like 5 to 7 business days to do, right? To finally have, even sometimes more, to come up with a final resolution that both sides agree on. But that time, we had to do it right away. And so we were in the office until I think like 2 in the morning. And in my head, I'm like, well, this is ridiculous. We're tired. We need to go home. We can do this in the morning. They can wait. But what I noticed, and even though I was frustrated, I noticed each person, again, chairman, president, accountant, and one other manager, they were thinking, okay, it's like a game of chess. It was strategy. It was shogi, right? So they're thinking, if we say this, they're going to say A or B. If we say that, they're going to say C or D. If we say this, and on and on and on. And we did that all night long. I was so frustrated. I had to take a taxi home. Fortunately, the company paid for it. I was tired, but I come in the morning, signed. The signed document came in on the fax machine and we were done. That's it. We sent them a final document that they approved right away because it was the best decision. So that changed my perspective on all kinds of decision making in Japan. And I realized this attention to detail, this they're being courteous towards the other side. They're thinking how the other side will react, and they keep going back and forth, and it just really worked. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, this process is most of the times difficult to understand from our Western side. Yes. Because of the time-consuming aspect, right? It might take a lot of time, but in the end, the result is much more secure and profitable.
Yeah, I think so.
So we used to act more rapidly, faster, without thinking that much, without going into the detail, and without checking with other partners, with other colleagues. So that might or may lead us to failure, or to do things again, to repeat the process, or just to make very, very costly mistakes.
Exactly. And it is hard. You're right. It is hard to understand how that process could be valuable, but I've experienced it so many times, and I really have gained an appreciation and actually think, okay, let's just stop for a second. Let's not think short term. Let's kind of look at this from a bigger perspective. And I find that it's done very well in that way.
Good. And Kasia, you had experience, as I also was lucky enough to have it, to work with the creative side of Japanese industry, on the music industry, and also from the very traditional and classic corporate Japanese companies, Ikigai Connections. Before yes. that, you wanted to share the opportunities, job opportunities on a previous blog, right?
Yes.
And then you created ikigaiconnections.com. Let us know about the origin. What does Ikigai Connections mean, and your project?
Well, thank you very much for asking. And this is kind of like my baby. This is something that I have thought about for a very long time. And even though I told myself I'm not a very technical person, and all my former employees will tell you that, but I overcame that. I wanted to do something, so I did. And I first started with just blog advice, just throwing information onto the internet and seeing if somebody would be interested. I created a job board to help provide an opportunity for companies to showcase their jobs, and for job seekers to create a profile so that I can help connect them. So Ikigai Connections, the name came about because I actually wanted Ikigai Consulting, but that website was taken. So last minute I changed it to Connections, because consulting, CO, for some reason it had the same, it came to my mind at the same time. But Ikigai means the thing that you really want to do. So maybe many of your listeners will understand that Ikigai in Japanese it was made famous when this book by Daniel Butner was written about the blue zones, various parts in the world where the people live the longest. And he went on to talk about their diets and communities and things like that. But in Okinawa, which is one of those blue zones, he listed that one of the main reasons for living longer is because they have an ikigai. They have something that they wake up and they want to do something. They're ready to go. So I want that for everybody in terms of their career. Now, there's people who say that you don't have to like what you do. A job and your personal can be separate. And I completely understand that sometimes you need to do that and you don't have to mix the two. But for the people who actually want to enjoy their jobs, who spend 8 or more hours a day, sometimes way more, on a career, I think it's important to enjoy it. Now, I have enjoyed every one of my jobs. I've loved them. I am still in touch with all of my former, coworkers and bosses, and I'm thankful for all those experiences. And I want people to have that same experience, because the saddest thing to me is when I hear a story, oh, I'm working at this company for X number of years and I hate it, but I have to pay the bills. It's understandable that sometimes you need to do something to get out of a financial situation, but I believe that there is a job for you, regardless of your financial needs. You can work, you can use your talents and be paid and be happy. Because if you're happy, your family's happy, your relationships are happier. So that's why Ikigai is such an important part of my company name. And so currently I've expanded a little bit. My blogs have expanded. I'm offering a lot of services. I have phone conversations with people if they're looking to determine their Ikigai, because many people write me, I don't know what my Ikigai is. So I have a lot of blog posts, but I also talk them through it if they want. I also have online training programs, which I just recently finished. And basically there's 2 kinds. So the first one is Japanese Jobs 100 levels. So it's 5 courses to help you find your Ikigai, work on your resume, prepare for interviews, know what networking is, and actually applying to the job. So those are 5 courses. The first one is free, which anybody can try to see how I teach. But I also have a shorter 5-day program, which is just a little bit, maybe like 30 to 60 minutes a day. And that whole thing is free. It's just a 5-day course on quick tips to get you ready for a job search. So I talk about things like the JLPT. I mentioned networking and business cards and being able to do it online and in person. And so just some quick tips. So I think you mentioned you might include them in the links. So those are the 2 things that I am offering there. But basically, I do a lot of speaking and webinars, and I'm trying to help people to first realize that they can have an Ikigai, especially if it's related to Japanese, and to find a job around it. It's not going to be easy because many companies may not be ready for the Byrons and the Kasias who love Japan so much and we want to work with you, but they're opening to it and they're interested in new ideas and new talents. So we have to show ourselves. So if you're studying Japanese and you want to use it in any career, whether it's artistic related or business, very corporate, it's all possible. It's not easy, but it's definitely possible. And I want to help you get there. So that is my end goal with my current company.
Great, Kasia. I'm interested on this program, on these courses, and actually we have a link to your courses in contactojapon.com. And the reason is because even though we are focused on the Spanish-speaking countries, we all know that we need to have certain level of English to apply for basically any scholarship in the world, including Japan. So either because you have to work in English or your study will be in English, or might be in Japanese, but still you need the English for your daily life as long as you don't have a proper level of Japanese. So I didn't find any problem on connecting with your course and promoting your course because we will need English. So the faster, the earlier we start studying, practicing, preparing ourselves, our resume, our LinkedIn profile, our presentation, everything in English, the better it will go afterwards in the interview or your application for the MEXT scholarship. So this is a great opportunity. I find it very useful, not only for people who, or especially for people who still students on the last years of their university, who are not that clear what to study, or they like Japan, but they don't find the proper way to connect professionally to continue their studies in Japan, but also to young professionals who have already finished their studies, they are working, and they find a way to have the experience of working in Japan. Contacto Japón is currently dedicated or focusing mostly on students and professionals for creative careers. So like designers, illustrators, chefs, architects, photographers. So how do you see this, this group on the current environment in Japan? So how do you see the connection or the opportunities for the job opportunities for foreigners at this moment? Or let's imagine the end of the COVID,
Right.
let's say
right.
mid of next year. So how do you see the perspective?
Great question. And I have many things to say. And basically, I'm going to tell everybody that nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible.
Good.
So keep that in mind. Yes, currently we have a COVID situation. I'm hoping it gets resolved. I'm hoping that Tokyo Olympics 2021 happen. I'm hoping that people can travel with no restrictions, things like that. But regardless of when that happens, the time to prepare is now. So we can always prepare. We can always do networking, with connections, searching for companies, things like that. So, and also I'll quick mention, I also promote, it's not just Japanese jobs in Japan, but it can be any country. So just a side note, if there are maybe Japanese related companies in the creative field in Spain, for example, well then that's also a great opportunity to find and make those connections now, especially since you can't really leave the country, but you still want a little bit of that Japan connection, then you can try to look for something in your country. But to answer your question about culture, creative fields, granted, my experience in the creative fields are a little bit less than many of your followers, but I believe whether it's any kind of artistic, whether it's food related, sake, or biru related, or arts, drawings, woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, if it's music, if it's design, if it's manga, anime, whatever kind of artistic idea you may have and you want to be a part of that industry, I think that you need to do two things. You need to research the heck out of any company that may be related to your desired creative field, see what companies are out there. And then two, you need to network. I know now it seems impossible to network in person, obviously, but we have all discovered the beauty of LinkedIn. LinkedIn especially, I believe, is good. I know that in Japan, the users in Japan aren't as many as the users overseas. However, the people in Japan that are on LinkedIn are probably the people that you want to connect with anyways. So get on LinkedIn, start finding people, start connecting, asking questions, comment on posts so that people see who you are. If you're looking for a job in a particular field, add that circle around your picture to say seeking opportunities, and just get it out there, because what you keep in your mind, people can't read your mind. So you have to talk about it. And the more connections you make, the more industries you're interested in. I think that, the more people you find in the industries that you're interested in, you will be able to hear about interesting opportunities that come up. And I talk about this in both of my online training programs. Networking is probably the most effective way of finding a career, a job, because a lot of times companies use word of mouth connections to find future employees. They may share job information with their current employees or connections that they know of. This is before it actually goes to the job boards. So by having connections in the field, you're going to hear that information earlier than the general public will be. So don't be part of the general public. Go ahead and start making those connections. So for example, let's say you are a chef and you love Japanese food and you want to one day go to Japan and become a sushi chef. You've watched all the movies, you've connected with restaurants and maybe foodie blogs or whatever online, but try to find maybe another person, maybe connecting with someone on a different podcast. You hear a guest speaker talk about that they started their own sake business in a different country. Reach out to them. Sake is not your thing, but they may have connections in that world. So start a little bit generically and keep going small and just talk to people. I really think that's one of the best ways to do it, especially now when you can't go travel there. And does Spain have the same as the United States where you have a 90-day tourist visa to go to Japan? Is it a 90-day?
Yeah, most of the countries, yeah, for tourism.
Most of the countries.
Also,
Yeah, so,
sorry, from our community, from Spanish and Latin American countries, the tourist visa is 90 days for 90 days, and also for Spain, I'm not sure for Mexico also the working visa, the working holiday visa, which is like 1 year with the opportunity to work, the permission to work. So fantastic. Yeah, they have that opportunity.
So that's once the world reopens and you can take advantage of that 90-day tourist visa.
Exactly.
Do your networking beforehand so that when you get to Japan on that tourist visa, let's say you do go there for a month or so and you stay there just for the purpose of finding a job. If you make your connections now, then you can go there and actually do that actual search. However, Japanese companies are also open to online interviewing like now and maybe some remote work. Of course, for the creative professions, sometimes you have to be there in person, but I've heard of many stories. For example, there's the Small Business Japan podcast. If you check that out, and I can send you the link if you want, but there's interviews with people who are, many are in the artistic fields and they're doing something that's their profession and that's creative and Japan related. So listen to other stories, get inspired, make the connections, and start your job hunting process. And then when the world does reopen and you can go to Japan, if that's your dream, you'll be able to already have some in there too. And there's interesting stories, like there's a person who was a sword apprentice for 2 years, I believe. He wanted to go to Japan and he did it, and he worked with his master and he just learned how to make katana. Can you imagine that situation? That's a very unique story, but he reached out to people. He asked, hey, can I come study under you? And can you teach me? I will do everything for you if you teach me the skills. Nothing is impossible. So it doesn't matter how crazy you may think your idea is. I think you should look into it and take action.
There is a precious advice. I usually tell my students that Japan is closer than they think. And Kasia, I know you are short of time now, so let us know about your an invitation to your free course and a message for this army of students and professionals with Japan on his mind.
Well, everything I offer is on my website, ikigaiconnections.com. So IKIGAI, and I think Byron, you may add a link to that.
I will put the link on the comments, yeah.
Beautiful. There is a section at the top for job seekers. If you click there, then I have a whole list of services that I offer, including the free online training programs and the other one for Japanese jobs. So if you have any questions, of course, ask there, and there's all my links to my social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. But my final message to everybody is to repeat that nothing is impossible. I really want people to believe in their dreams. I cannot stand it when I hear somebody say, oh, I had this, or I have or had this dream, and I can't do it, or my family won't approve, or I don't know, I can't, it just seems impossible to go to a different country, or I don't know, it just lots of confusion and negativity and that kind of thinking. If you have a dream, I think you should do it. And don't let anybody tell you that it's not possible. You have to believe in it, and it's not going to happen just thinking about it. You actually have to take action. So if you take one step, then that step will lead to another step, and so on and so forth. I never knew I was going to be here 20 years ago. I never knew I was going to be in Italy or Poland or Japan working. It was just one baby step after another. And if you are confused with decisions, just if you're like, oh, is it A, B, or C? I don't know what to do. Don't choose nothing. You have to choose at least one. And if A turns out to be something that you don't care for, good job. You just decided that A is not a selection. So now you're on B or C. Try B. And if B sounds great, awesome, go forth. And if you are really curious about C, you can try that too. But you have to take action. You have to take one step in any direction in order to see if your dreams can come true. So,
fantastic. Fantastic. And just before closing, I want to mention your blog, because you are sharing personal experiences from many other students and professionals who had their dream and make them true in Japan. Yes. So I invite you guys, everyone, to have a look at these stories in ikigaiconnections.com. Thank you very much, Kasia. And wonderful. All the best for your project. We keep working. We are preparing something very interesting. I hope we can share it with you soon, with all of your both your audience and our audience. So, どうもありがとうございました。
こちらこそありがとうございました。
お疲れ様でした。
So fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kasia. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Deseo que esta entrega haya sido de tu agrado y que sigas disfrutando con nosotros de lo mejor de Japón para gente creativa. Honto ni arigatou gozaimashita. Muchísimas gracias y seguimos en contacto. Nos vemos. Mata ne.